The sounds of my footfalls on the deck resounded along the corridors as I made my way from the suit bay towards my office. My fury was evident enough that Nav's drones were sure to clear the way without a word or look being necessary. Mazzy, who had no doubt been intending to try to calm my rage, thought better of it and just stood to the side of my office door at attention and merely saluted, awaiting orders. I want everything from all of our systems. Get it analyzed and cross-checked. I want it all on my desk by the end of the day. A curt nod, and Mazzy was gone, knowing better than to do otherwise. I walked into my office and sealed the room, poured myself a stiff drink, then stalked around to sit in my chair, and finally looked at the subject of my anger, the man that had just ended the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people. The pirates were all gone now, and the system was clear for us to claim. Mission accomplished. In fact, it would be at least a month before anyone or anything biological could be able to enter to begin reclamation and recovery efforts, so contaminated with lethal energies the system now was. I stared at Nada, who, to his credit, did not look away or otherwise try to avoid the rage that was no doubt roiling in my glare. Nada, I began, doing what I could to maintain my composure, taking a large pull from my drink before continuing. I know you are aware of my unit's history when it comes to civilians, and the fact that in our thousands of years of service, we have never had a civvy die in our operations. He nodded and opened his mouth to reply, but I continued on. According to the preliminary readings, you just melted over 1 million people, and most likely several million. And don't try to give me any of this, they aren't people, they're pirates bullshit. But did I give you permission to speak, dwarf? Nada went stiff. You are a part of this unit, this outfit, and that means you will keep your mouth closed until you are instructed to speak by your commanding officer. Am I clear? A stiff nod was the only reply as I continued. We will get to your reasoning in a moment, and it had best be something good, or I swear, by the family as my witness, I will personally fly you a light week out from anything and leave you floating without a suit. For the briefest of instants, I thought I caught a glimpse of amusement flash across Nada's face, as if he were impressed. I decided to let it pass unremarked, as he was a Longbeard after all, and age can make even the strangest of things humorous. And so I continued. We determined that the pirates were entirely stationed at the gate complex inside the system. They had no ability to access the rest of the system or leave the gatehouse, only to receive the automated shipments from the system. And they clearly barely even had that limited control of things. They lacked the ability to adjust any of the production lines or products being made, or even turn them on. Another slow pull of my drink, allowing the rush of the contained energies to focus my mind and dull my rage. By my count, there were less than 500 pirates in that complex, with the rest of the life detected in the system belonging on the planets. Lives that were unaware of the pirates' existence, and unless something turns up in the report I'm about to get, they were not even able to get in contact with them. From what I saw looking at the systems of the gatehouse, whoever was on those planets was unaware of the nature of the forges and the factories dotting their skies. They were primitives, savage races at best. No indication of any tech on world. And you just chose to initiate a full solar system-wide purge without any preamble, warning, or even the faintest attempt to gain authorization. Not only killing the pirates, but every other soul in that system. I took a moment to calm myself and then finished. Now I want an answer. Now you can tell me why I shouldn't be prepping my suit for your final adventure. Nada stood and nodded before he began, saluting. Sir, I accept my actions were in direct violation of the chain of command, of the presumed protocols of the conduct of conflict, and of most of the crew's better reasoning. However, the situation required swift and immediate action if the realm's safety was to... He stopped as soon as I had lifted my hand from my glass. Quite the claim, Nada. Go on, but don't forget you are speaking to a veteran of many, many more years than yourself. Again, that near imperceivable flash on his face. And I have little patience for semantics or word games, so speak plainly and directly. I lowered my hand, and he continued. Sir, the total amount of soul-bearing individuals killed in that action was limited to only the pirates and their logistical staff in the gatehouse. Your estimates of millions of dead counts, as you've said, the beings on the planets. However, as I am sure the reports will bear out, none of them were in possession of anything approaching a soul. In addition, a visit to the brig will see that I was sure to cover my ass. One of the beings is being held there under maximum security protocols. I shook my head. Alright. So you grabbed one of them to prove they are not soul-bearing, and furthermore are a threat to the realms. I reached over and tapped a console, and the image of the being in its cell, calmly pacing, examining its enclosure and taking in each detail, sprang into being. Convince me, Nada, that this is what you say it is. A few more taps and an overlay of various scans and data appeared, all indicating that this was what it looked like. An orckin of some description. And not a primitive orc, who most certainly has a soul. Nada seemed to consider things for a moment. Yes, sir. I will head down there and prove it to you. One request? I nodded, a little confused at the sudden shift of tone. Please make it so only you and perhaps Nav are watching. It might get a little messy and personal. Of course. I was still confused. Nada was surely able to handle an orckin. He simply waited for me to unseal the door so he could go to the brig. With the stiffness to his posture I had not seen so far in the dwarf. But, without hesitation, as soon as the door was open, he made his way out without a word or sign of displeasure. An hour later, Nada was in medbay recovering, and I was now furious at myself. Not only was Nada right, he had nearly died to prove it. And it had all happened faster than I had thought possible. As soon as he had entered the brig, the Orkin just turned towards him and began trying to get at him, shifting and changing forms to overwhelm and break out from its cell with frightening ease. In the few minutes it had taken me to intervene, Nada had managed to kill it, but had taken a massive beating of his own, and he couldn't stand, bleeding badly and having several broken bones. As I lifted him to carry him to the med bay, he spoke one word, Harvester, before he passed out, mumbling in a nearly forgotten and very old tongue. That stubborn rock banger. If he had only said that in the first place. Looks like I was going to owe the bearded bastard a barrel of his favorite drink, for he had possibly saved billions with his actions. Millions of harvesters by the family. That could have spelled the death of everything. By the 9 and 4, welcome back to the library. I am the recorder, and today we take a look at an existential threat to the realms, one thought to have been ended in recent ages, but despite that it still presented itself even after its defeat. This threat is known simply as the Harvesters. As my perceptive patrons are no doubt aware, this will only be a brief look into these poorly understood automatons and their known purpose and methods of acting out their perverse programming and goals. The exact point of creation for these banes of the realm is unknown, but evidence would seem to indicate that they were a part of the Great Work that occurred in the brief period of peace between the First and Second Wars of Feather and Scale. The fact that they seem totally engineered for the task of detecting, tracking, and even killing the Celestial Touch by absorbing their very essence during a Reformation event would seem to fall in line with one of purported goals of the work itself: the erasure or denial of the celestial elements from the realms. They are shapeshifters and can take any form, able to gain or deduct mass as needed for them to close in on their prey or otherwise conceal themselves. Able to blend into groups or other collections of people via low-level telepathic abilities and hyper-advanced deception systems, harvesters are experts in fading and appearing as they determine best, with only the presence of prey triggering actions that would give away the nature of a harvester. So potent and well thought out are the concealment protocols that a harvester can engage in as a natural state. So, they will often lie in wait amongst a population, preferably in large cities or locations with a high amount of trade and travel, as this increases the odds of their prey appearing otherwise engaged in tasks that would bring them into the harvester's chosen hunting grounds, while making it easier for the occasional missing person to go unremarked on by the community and authorities at large. When a celestially touched is detected, all focus is on the capture and consumption of the energies that can be so taken. Now, they will attempt to maintain their cover, and thus they will plan their attacks to avoid being noticed or the like. However, by some quirk of fate, or perhaps divine karma, the celestially touched seem to have a sense for the presence of harvesters. Generally described as a vague and very ill-defined worry akin to knowing you are being watched. This sense has proven enough in several cases to allow for the escape from or the defeat of the harvesters involved. Once they have engaged their prey, assuming that a sudden ambush did not end things from the start, it becomes quite obvious that they are purpose-built for their work, as they are immune to and have countermeasure built for all the natural abilities and gifts of the touched. This tends to result in a stunned and very confused celestially touched being slain and forced into reformation, as the harvester shifts its form into whatever weapon forms it feels are best for the current situation. As soon as the reformation process begins, the harvester begins to consume the massive bursts of power that are released as the universe attempts to return the touched to life. The harvester will continue to consume the entirety of this power, sending it to wherever it goes, and continue to do this until the touched own soul is utterly and completely consumed by the process. One of the greatest threats of the harvesters is the fact that the celestially touched are generally considered to serve a fundamental function within the metaphysical processes of the realms, and the potential genocide of them would likely threaten the very nature of the realms and her existence. This is why the harvesters are a high priority for the forces that eventually tracked down the supposed source of the danger, and ended it quite convincingly, via the realm's traditional method of unrestrained and total destruction. That source was a massive factory, the size of a planet by the reports, and it did nothing but build and deploy harvesters. At its center, the creator of the harvesters was discovered, hardwired into his creation and bloated on the excesses of celestial energy that had been harvested over the ages. He was an Analar, unsurprisingly, speculated to have perhaps been a Dark Wall acolyte, who did little but rant and rave about bringing the elements to balance and saving reality from the coming end of all. He had clearly gone mad. His death and the destruction of the facility was thought to be the end of the threat, with the entrapped energies being released back into the flow of reality, balance restored. While this did not bring back any of the slain, it was thought for a time that no others would have to suffer the same fate. That was until the already random and rare reports of missing touched or of harvester sightings didn't decrease or stop in any significant way. They were already hard enough to detect as it was, so it took several centuries to conclusively determine that, in fact, the harvesters were still operating, albeit with even more caution and patience, proving even harder to detect. This has raised many questions on how this was possible, and more importantly, where was that stolen energy being sent? The leading theory is that large reserves of unactivated units, as well as redundant power storage for the stolen energies, must have been constructed in the ages before the destruction of the original facility. These numbers could be anywhere from a small handful, or dozens, or maybe even hundreds, or perhaps even more factory complexes, each set with its own fail-safes to ensure the great work goes on. One thing that is clear is that after the destruction of the original facility, revealed or otherwise exposed harvesters are far more prone to creating as much destruction as possible if it is unlikely they can escape, seeming to want to make the act of interference one that is associated with a high body count. This slight shift in tactics seems to point to the fact that there is still some form of guiding intelligence as far as the general strategy and operational conduct of the harvesters is concerned. Locating and dealing with these reserves and failsafes is a priority among the celestially touched and their allies, with large bounties being paid out to those that confirm the destruction of even a single harvester unit. However, spreading the knowledge of the harvesters to the wider public has not been seen as anything but a way to sow paranoia and discord, and so has been avoided. No efforts to suppress the information have been made, it should be noted, so there does exist a fair number of rumors and drunken stories that tell of these mysterious shape-shifting soul leaders, even if there is a lack of academic literature on them. And as we come to the end of this entry, I hope you have a better understanding of the threat the harvesters present to the realms, my perceptive patrons, and that you have enjoyed this short look into them. I have been, as always, the recorder, and I want to thank you for visiting the library again for this entry. Until you next return to the library, by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other. Nearly a day later, Nada woke up. I was sitting in his room waiting, as I had been since I brought him here for the automedic systems to treat. He opened his eyes, took in the room and looked at me seriously, beginning to sit up. But before he could even ask, I spoke. "No one, Nada. Even Nav is in the dark on this one. Far as I know, he's never worked with a touch, so he didn't recognize what you are from what you did. He nodded, with relief evident even behind the soreness as he laid back into his bed, letting me continue. The reports came back while you were out, and just like you said, all soulless biomechanical constructs. However, as far as any of the crew can figure out from the scans and the available evidence, best guess is this was an old feather and scale weapons project that you were ordered to delete by our sponsor in order to deny them to the ancient empire. Nada nearly began to argue before he realized the implications of what I was saying. Just for safety's sake, I went ahead and cleared the entire system of all designs not originally included in its database when it was built. So whatever those things were, they will never come out of this place again. He still had a hard look on his face, seemingly unconvinced by my assurances. Calm down. It was clear that someone had added those things to the workload after its creation. If I had to guess, it would have been done as part of the great work. Lots of stories about things like that at the time. Systems receiving updates for no reasons, and from all across the NLR and Dragon connected spaces. Nada, seemingly now content with the explanation, closed his eyes before softly speaking a comment and question as I was walking out to let him rest. I've yet to see you puzzled, or even slowed down by a single NLR security system we've encountered, including those actively interfered with by the Antane. How are you so familiar with ancient NLR tech? And why are you able to bypass and reset systems older than many of the gods with ease? I answered with my own question as I walked out the door. Why do you sleep talking Dragois? And old Dragois at that, Longbeard?